Hello and welcome to the fifth episode of the Leadership in Construction podcast. I'm your host, Michael, and today I have an absolute brilliant guest with me. This is Moreblessing Luxton. Moreblessing started her career out in Zimbabwe and then moved to the UK in the early noughties to join Highways Agency, or Highways England, which it is now, and has worked on some of the major schemes within the UK. Since then, Moreblessing has moved to Zambia, and her role is cross-border infrastructure expert. So, Moreblessing, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael, for having me.
I'd like to start off, Moreblessing, how I sort of ask everybody is, how did you get into construction?
That's an interesting question. I didn't plan at all to get into construction. In fact, I didn't even know what civil engineering was about. When I left high school, I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do. So I tried a few things. I got offered a place to fill in a maternity leave place at a school where I graduated from. So I worked there for 6 months, and I quickly realized that I wasn't going to be a teacher in my life. I didn't particularly like standing in front of people and talking. And then one of my teachers, her husband was a clinical district officer in the village we lived in. So they said to me, instead of staying at home, I had graduated as the best student in the school, so everyone wanted to know what I was going to do, and they were trying to be helpful. So one of my teachers said, okay, my husband will help you to get a place so that you can train as a nurse in the capital city of Zimbabwe. So I accepted that offer, and they helped me to apply, and I got a place as a student nurse. I went to training, and within a few months, I quickly realized that that wasn't what I wanted to do. So I resigned and I came back home, and my mom was the most upset woman in the village. But just before I left the School of Nursing, I was sharing a room with a friend, and she was upset to see me going. But then she said to me, she brought an advert from the Ministry of Transport. They were advertising for civil engineering students. So she said to me, why don't you apply for this before you go back to the village? Maybe something will come out of this. So I submitted an application, went back home, stayed home for about 3 months, and nothing happened. And then one day I got a letter from the Ministry of Transport. They were calling me for an interview, and I went for the interview. To cut the story short, I got accepted on the class of 14. They wanted to try women on the course, and I was the only girl in the class of 14. And there was an attraction for me there because it was a sandwich course. So we were trained and getting paid at the same time. So I took on that course and went for training for 5 years, and I graduated after 5 years, and they offered me a full-time job with the Department of Roads, which was under the Ministry of Transport. And thereafter, I worked for Ministry of Transport in Zimbabwe for 18 years before I got another opportunity to go to the UK to do my master's degree in highways engineering. So that's how I got into construction. It wasn't planned, but kind of happened.
I think that's a common sort of theme through most people I ask. It always sort of seems to sort of happen by accident. But I take it that it's something that you enjoy doing now. You enjoy construction, enjoy civil engineering?
I do. I think my passion is to make a difference. So I quite enjoy my work because when I deliver a project, you look back and you see the work that you've done, you see the impact that the project is making in a community. So that's what kind of gives me satisfaction in the construction industry.
Absolutely. And so when you moved to Birmingham and you did your master's degree, is this where you got introduced into Highways England?
Yes. So I was doing my master's degree. The plan was that I would go back home because I was quite enjoying working for the Department of Roads in Zimbabwe. And the plan was that after my master's degree, I would go back home and carry on what I was doing. But towards the end of my my master's degree, I got headhunted, and by a few companies actually. I got headhunted by Faber Monsell. If you still remember Faber Monsell, I think they changed their name along the way. They become Michelle or something. But and then I also got headhunted by Highways England. And the natural place for me to go was Highways England because it sounded familiar and similar to what I was doing back home. I was working to a similar organization in Zimbabwe. So I accepted my first job with Highways England was service delivery manager for structures in the West Midlands. So I was looking after the development and delivery of structures schemes on the motorways covering the West Midlands region.
And so how did your career develop within Highways England from there on in?
I had a very fulfilling 10 years actually with Highways England. I was service delivery manager for 5 years working in the West Midlands region. And then after that, I got promoted and I was working on as a project manager, but on the policy side of the roads. So you will remember that in Highways England, they have a service that they call the Traffic Officer Service. That time they were reviewing that service, which particularly looks at the operating of the network rather than building the network. So I was given a role as project lead to review that service so that we can gather evidence to support the Department for Transport so that they can make a decision whether it was a viable service to carry on or they needed to look at something else. So I worked with the 7 regions of the traffic control centers in England, reviewing that service, gathering evidence so that we can support the ministers on their decision making to decide whether they should fund that service any longer. And we did a good job of that. And if you know that the traffic officer service has expanded quite a lot in England, looking at the operation of the motorways. Then after that, I was also promoted and I went to the commercial division of Highways England, where I was supporting 7 regions of Highways England as National Commercial Development Manager. I was working on interpreting the contracts so that all the regions would interpret and implement the contracts in a consistent manner. You will know that Highways England has what they used to call managing agent contracts. They then evolved into asset support contracts. I don't know what they call them now, but those are their maintenance contracts. So I was supporting those contracts so that if we have any disputes, if we have any issues in interpreting how the contracts are being operated, I would work with other teams and we collate responses and we created a repository on how people interpreted the contracts, and then I would support the directors also so that they can know how much liabilities they have within Highways England in terms of contractual disputes that were arising through the operating of the contracts. So that was a very fulfilling role as well. It was a kind of contract and commercial role at the same time. And then from there, I moved to being a team leader for major projects procurement. You know, soon after the recession, we got a lot of money from from government when the UK government were trying to revive the economy. Highways England got a lot of money, and I was given a role to lead on developing the collaborative delivery framework for to fast track the delivery of the road investment strategy for Highways England. So I led on that. It was a £5 billion framework that we developed within Highways England. And that was a fulfilling role as well. And then from that, I worked on what they used to call UK Central. It's a project, if you know Birmingham well, it's a project at the M42 Junction 10, the triangle towards Birmingham International Airport and the NEC. That project was to support the arrival of the HS2 line from London to Birmingham. And we wanted to upgrade the M42 Junction 10 so that once the first stop of HS2 was in that area, so that we were able to absorb all the human traffic and the motorized traffic that was going to be generated by HS2. So I did a lot of work there, leading that project, and I was coordinating the work from Highways England, Birmingham International Airport, all the big stakeholders, Network Rail and HS2 themselves, so that we could have a big collaborative program instead of piecemeal. And then from there, where did I go? From there, I was asked to develop a role. You know, when they were doing the managing agent contracts, part of that was a lump sum allocation that used to go to the contractors themselves, principal contractors for motorways maintenance. But from the client side, Highways England, they didn't have a sponsor who made sure that although it's a lump sum that goes to the contractor, we are holding them accountable. We are monitoring and making sure that the lump sum is being put to good use. So after about 5 years of them implementing the managing agent contract, they realized that they wanted somebody to manage that. And I was asked to develop a role of a routine maintenance service delivery manager, which I did with a lot of work and a lot of support from other people. And at the end of that role, we managed to roll out that role throughout the whole country in 7 regions so that we can effectively manage the lump sum duty that we were paying the principal contractors within England. And then after that, by that time, it was 10 years of working in Highways England. And then I thought I had learned enough. I had been given a lot of opportunities in Highways England. So after 10 years in 2015, I left and I went to join Balfour Beatty Living Places as a team leader for major projects in Hereford.
I mean, that's the work that you've done in Highways England is obviously incredible. It requires a lot of stakeholder engagement. What sort of skills did you need to rely on in terms of stakeholder engagement?
Yes, most of those works you can't deliver them on your own. You need to take people with you on early on. You need to demonstrate to people that the things that you are proposing or the project that you are proposing will add value to their lives and to their communities. So talking to people from grassroots is important, engaging people within the parish. So most of the projects that I worked on, we engaged the people physically by having some community events. We engaged the people through project websites. We made sure in Highways England, they are very good at engagement. So each project, as soon as it starts, we would develop a website for the project where we post a lot of information from planning until implementation. We developed a lot of leaflets that we did door-to-door leaflet dropping. We worked with local authorities so that if we publish our website, we would link it to their website so that the websites could talk together and disseminate information to our stakeholders. So that way it helped us a lot to raise publicity of the projects, but also engage the community. So should they have any queries, for instance, they could send queries to the website. We had a hotline where they could call and leave questions there, and the relevant project sponsors could respond to that. So that worked well for stakeholder engagement.
So very much early engagement and listening, getting feedback from stakeholders as well seems very important.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm. So after you'd finished with Highways England and you'd gone to Balfour Beatty, obviously you've now moved back to Zambia. What is your role currently then in Zambia?
So in Zambia, I joined an organization called Common Markets for Eastern and Southern Africa. It's a regional economic community. It comprises of 23 countries in Africa. And I'm leading on a trade facilitation program. So it's interesting, isn't it? So that's what I was saying. Construction can be very wide. So now I'm developing and delivering infrastructure that support trade facilitation within the COMESA region. So I'm working with 7 countries at the moment. I'm working with Zambia, Zimbabwe, Malawi, Tanzania, Congo DR, Ethiopia, and Kenya. So my role is to work with those countries, identify infrastructure at the borders that support trade facilitation, particularly small-scale traders, because it has been established that we have a lot of small-scale traders, although most of the trade is not registered, is not quantified, but it accounts for a big chunk of the economy of those countries. So this project's objective is to support those small-scale traders, provide infrastructure at the border that will make their trading quick and easy, so that we can support them to trade across the borders, and we can support the countries in regional integration. So that's what I'm doing down here.
That sounds like an amazing initiative. What sort of infrastructure do you mind me asking in terms of, take it roads is a key part of the infrastructure? What other infrastructure is it that is needed at these borders?
So we've done a lot of work since last year. We carried out some baseline data assessment so that we could establish what is at the borders, what is this condition of the existing infrastructure. And from the baseline data, that focused us a bit to carry on to the next stage to do detailed needs assessments. And from those detailed needs assessments, we have established that most of the stakeholders, there are lots of things that we could have done, but because of limited budgets, limited timescales of delivery, we have identified 7 sites where we are going to build border markets. And the idea behind providing border markets is that when small-scale traders are trading, most of their goods are perishables. So if we provide a facility in the vicinity of the border, they cross, for instance, from Zambia to Zimbabwe, they go to a border market, they sell their goods there, they buy some stuff from there, and they come back to Zambia quickly. They don't need to go inland to go and sell their goods inland and lose time. Whilst they are losing time, their goods are also spoiling and perishing. So that is the idea of providing border markets. We want to shorten the trading time. We want to preserve their goods. We want to provide a safe facility where they can just cross, and these border markets are supposed to reciprocate each other. So they will have an operating mechanism between the 2 countries, like a bilateral agreement. So sometimes it will be market day in Zambia, so the Zimbabweans will come to Zambia, they sell their goods, they buy goods, they go back to Zimbabwe. And then another day in the week, it will be market day in the other country, they do the same. So that way we are promoting regional integration, we are promoting the movement of local goods within this block, we are also improving the livelihoods of the people who are doing that small-scale trading business.
Wow, I mean, it does sound amazing. And I take it a lot of the initial studies, you need to do a lot of listening to the local people that live in these borders to understand what it is that they need to help facilitate their trading and how it would better their lives. And I take it wasn't very difficult to highlight to everybody the benefits. I mean, have you met any challenges whilst you've been doing these studies that you've had to overcome?
Yes, they are always challenges. I think when you are delivering public infrastructure, there are lots of stakeholders to deal with. So in this particular instance for our project, because we are dealing with border infrastructure, the beneficiaries to start with were quite wide-ranged. So we have border agencies in the likes of immigration and customs officials. We have border agencies in the likes of clearing agencies. And then we have the representation of the small-scale traders themselves, which are cross-border trade associations. So all those people, they were likely to benefit from this project. So when you are doing your stakeholder engagement, everybody's excited, everybody's expecting and hoping to benefit from the project. So there's a lot of evidence gathering that is required. There's a lot of negotiations that is required for us to then at the end agree that actually we are settling to support the cross-border trade associations because they will make this border space more viable if we organize all the traders. For instance, if you have been to Africa before, you will know that the borders are very busy. Most of that is caused by traders just trading on the streets. So if we organize them into associations and then we remove them from the street and we put them at a market, it means we have managed to decongest the border in a way. It's not complete, but we managed to solve a little bit of the congestion at the border. But for us to reach that stage, there's a lot of negotiations with the local authorities, with immigration and customs, and to convince them to say, actually, this is the appropriate infrastructure that this project can deliver.
There's a lot of highlighting and looking at the key benefits around that. And with such sort of limited budgets at times, is there a case of having to manage expectations with your stakeholders?
Yes, there is. So one of the things that our project is doing at the moment is, although we are delivering it from COMESA does not own the project. I have highlighted at the beginning of the interview that we are working with 7 countries, which means 7 governments. What we aim to do all the time is to make sure that we work through a coordinating ministry. In this case, we are working through the Ministry of Trade for each country. And we try to bring them along so that we get buy-in from them. They are part of the consultations, they are part of the decision making, so that at the end of the day, when we deliver something, the local government is part of it, and they already have bought into it and they are supportive of it.
That's bringing them along with
Yes.
the project, with the studies, so that everybody's part of it, and I take it owns part of it as well.
Yes.
So how's that funded then at the cross borders? Is it a central government or a central body that deals with the funding side of things?
So COMESA gets funding from lots of development partners. For this particular one program, it's called Small Scale Cross-Border Trade Initiative. It's being funded through the European Development Fund.
And how's it decided in terms of where the money gets spent across these 7 projects?
So these projects, they come from a long way back. They are developed, like any other project, like the projects that we do in the UK, we start from the identifying the issue, we lobby our governments to say there's a problem here, we need to resolve this. So we do the same here in this part of the world. So the projects, they are scoped over a long period. And then once we have a scope, we lobby the development partners, and we sign. Once the development partners are satisfied that they want to spend their money on that particular program, we sign a financial agreement. These are very high level agreements between COMESA and the development partners. They are signed at high level. We develop program documents with conditions, terms of conditions on what is in the project and what is outside the project. All that is clearly documented in the program document and in contract documents and in the finance agreements. So by the time the likes of myself come on the project as the experts, by the time we join the project, everything has been agreed at high level. We have project documents which set the timescales, the budgets, and everything. So our job is just to come and pick the project documents, and we deliver what has been agreed at high level.
Mm-hmm. And so what stage are these projects at the moment? Are we into detailed design? When's construction planned?
So now this project is it started in 2018, May of 2018, and it runs to July of 2022. So I've said we have done a series of studies. So at the moment we are now doing feasibility studies. We have just finished developing concept designs of the market, just to scope. I carried out some end user requirement consultations with the stakeholders, that is the local authorities and the cross-border trade associations themselves, just to tease out what they want in a market, just to establish what kind of commodities and products do they trade at that particular border, because each border is different. They trade different commodities at different borders. So I had these consultations from border to border with a set of stakeholders to establish the end user requirements, and the end user requirements are the ones that fed into the concept designs. So as we speak now, we have agreed a concept design for each market, and we are now calling for expressions of interest to do feasibility studies, just to investigate how feasible is the concept that we have come up with, how feasible is it on the land that we secured. And from there, from the feasibility studies, then we are going to move into detailed designs early next year. From there, the plan, I think, according to the work plans, we are supposed to start construction by May next year.
Wow.
And
May
that
next
will
year.
hopefully, early May next year, yes. Hopefully, if things keep going the way they should, we are hoping that we will do construction. You are an engineer yourself, you know that when we provide infrastructure, we want to leave a defect monitoring period so that we can monitor the infrastructure before we hand it over, before we close the project. So hopefully we should start construction in May, finish the construction, monitor until just before July 2022, so that we make sure we are handing over a good infrastructure to the governments that we are working with.
How long's construction planned then? A matter of months by the sound of it.
Yeah, I think it's between 6 to 8 months. Each border is going to be different, because I've said the commodities are different, so the plans and the structures are going to be slightly different. But we envisage that between 6 to 8 months we should complete each infrastructure at each border.
And I take it, is there float involved in all that for the program? So if you come across site constraints, site conditions which aren't expected, or have you been able to mitigate that through sort of detailed surveys?
Yes, so that's the reason why we are going to carry out feasibility studies now. Part of that feasibility study is to investigate the site itself, to make sure that there are no constraints, to do a physical investigation as well as some soil investigations, topography, geotechnics, just to make sure that the things like the underlying strata of the soil, for instance, there's no underlying rock, or there are no high water tables that will require special foundations, for instance. So we are hoping that the feasibility studies will establish some risks if there are any, and then they will also propose some mitigations. So by the time we go to detailed design, we should be dealing with those risks in mind so that we can mitigate, and we can also tighten the budget for delivering the project.
Makes a lot of sense. And just out of curiosity, what sort of ground conditions are you expecting? What's the sort of geology in these areas that you're looking at?
So they vary quite a lot. The one that is ahead of them all is at a border between Zambia and Malawi, but the Zambian side. It's an area called Chipata. The site that we acquired there is next to a stream, so that makes it a very damp area. It means the water tables, they vary quite a lot. So we need to do something clever with that site to make sure the site is drained, to also make sure that the surrounding areas are draining into the river and not draining towards the market site itself. And probably at detailed design, depending on what the soil profiling establishes, we may need to provide special foundations because of that condition of the stream that is at the bottom of the site. That is the only, I have another site in Kasumbalesa. Kasumbalesa is the border between Zambia and Congo. The site that we got there is quite an interesting site. It's an old dumping area. So it's likely to have issues with settlement because it's a site where they've been dumping rubbish for a long, long time.
Yeah.
So again, we need to do a lot of work with the local authorities. So I don't know how we're going to manage that because the site needs to be reclaimed first and rehabilitated before we can build on it. Mm-hmm. The rest of them are good sites, flat, and the geology is not very challenging. But those two are the ones that are making me do a lot of thinking because there's a lot of preparatory work needed there.
Mm-hmm. And so what, in terms of, to bring this one to sort of leadership, those sort of two challenging sites, particularly the one where it was a sort of waste dump area, what sort of skills are you employing in order to help manage those risks and communicate that risk around and share with your, I imagine you've got a fairly sizable team around you. What is it, how do you adapt your sort of leadership skills in order to sort of deal with these challenges?
So the teams that I work with, like I said, we are delivering this for the national government. So I have teams from the local authority. They give me their technical people to work with. I also have people from government. They give me people to work with. But there are also the end user beneficiaries that are the cross-border trade associations themselves, because they are the end users. They are quite excited. So sometimes they don't understand when we say we got land. They just think we are going to start digging and constructing tomorrow. But then I need to manage those expectations to say, look, this land is different from that land. Although we have land, we have these challenges. So it's communication, which is very important. You have to manage expectations. You have to give them information to say, these are the timelines. Sort of what I do with them is to create a roadmap for them to say, although we got land, it may not be we construct in the next month or so, because the thing that I get from them when I visit all the time is, oh, you are taking so long for us to start digging on the site. Or, oh, you have been gone for 3 months, what have you been doing? But I go for 3 months because I need to be managing expectations on the ground, but I also need to get buy-in from higher level, from senior management, from government officials, from other officials that are organizations that are within that locality. So it's not just going to be us and the cross-border traders who build this market, but it's also engaging everyone, because we do environmental impact assessments. It's going to affect the whole community. So it's communicating at all levels and getting buy-in at all levels and managing expectations at all levels.
Mm-hmm. And how important is how you communicate, in the way you communicate, and does that change depending on what level you're talking to?
It does change. I think there's a lot that makes it change. It's your audience, the audience that you are targeting. It's personalities. If you are working in a smaller team, for instance, you are working with different personalities. You are working with people with different skills. That makes the dynamics of our leadership change. It can't be static. You yourself as a person, you need to lead yourself first before you can lead the others. So you need to be checking, I think, yourself all the time and recalibrating yourself to the environment that you are in. So for instance, if I go to the borders, I'm working with cross-border trade associations, I'm working with the end users themselves. I have to calibrate myself on how I pitch whatever I'm pitching to them. And then if I go back to the national teams, their headquarters, if I'm talking to Minister of Trade, for instance, I have to recalibrate myself, because then the narrative becomes, although it's the same message that I'm passing, the way I'm going to present it to the chief executives, to the directors, to all those people who are senior, it's a different story, because the interests of the stakeholders are different at each level. So although I'm passing the same message, I have to just recalibrate the approach that I use so that the message gets to them in the right way.
Mm-hmm. And to understanding how to pitch it to these different stakeholders, these different people, is that something that can be learned? Is that something that comes with experience? Or do you have any advice for how to pitch it at different levels?
I think it comes with experience and observing other people. In my life, I've had a lot of mentors. I've had a lot of good line managers. I have had the privilege of working under people who held my hands and exposed me to boardrooms, for instance. So when I was in the UK, I had managers who would invite me to come to high-profile meetings, just for me to sit in the meeting with them, to shadow them, to see how they present difficult conversations, how they negotiate with senior managers, how they even negotiate with ministers at high level. I had that privilege, and that helps you to learn. It's not something that you learn in university. It's something that you learn on the ground. It's something that you learn through observing other people. Sometimes you get it wrong, and you have to learn the humility to admit that I didn't get that right, and also probably to ask, to say, what should I have done in that case? what was the right approach. If it were you, how would you have handled that? I have had privileges of working under managers who didn't beat me up. I messed up a few times and they set me down to say, that didn't go so well. What could you do differently now? And they gave me time to reflect and to just learn lessons and to propose different approaches. So it comes with experience and learning from others. Wow,
that's really important. Absolutely, I fully agree with all that. So the other thing I wanted to ask you was that is you've been announced as a finalist in the Trailblazers in the southern regions of Africa. Can you expand a bit more on that and explain what that is and what that's all about?
So this was just a campaign to recognize. It wasn't a winning race. It was, although we were finalists, we were thrilled to have been nominated into the finalists. But if you know that there are lots of people, lots of women out here doing great works, doing amazing works, making an impact in their communities. But we just so happened to have had this opportunity to be nominated in this campaign, and our profiles being raised and the light being shown on the work that we are doing. It was amazing to be amongst those people. I was in the top 32. I didn't make it to the top 10, but I went to Johannesburg to just celebrate with those who were in the top 10. It was amazing just to learn as well, because when you are in a certain sector, it's very difficult to just be in a silo and you don't see what other people are doing. So I had an opportunity to meet with pilots who are working in Dubai, for instance, and they are doing works in their communities to encourage young people to become pilots. I had an opportunity to meet with entrepreneurs who own their own businesses, and now instead of running businesses, they are running leadership courses so that they can train other young people to become entrepreneurs. So it was a good networking opportunity, but it felt good to be recognized and just to see that there's so much that can be done. I like the World Bank saying that says poverty does not have boundaries, so does excellency. So there's lots of work that we can do to impact the world.
And it's right in thinking that this initiative was primarily focused around women in these different sectors, these different industries, and their contribution, shining the light on their contribution. Is that correct?
Yes, it was mainly to shine, to just recognize that there are lots of women in leadership. It was mainly women in leadership that are doing amazing works, not that just concentrating on their day jobs, but they are also sacrificing to give back. There's one thing that I've learned during my career. When I was with Highways England, they were very good at developing leaders, and one of a leadership program that I attended was called FED, it's Future, Engage and Deliver. And the concept of that leadership program was that when you are in your early days of your career, you depend on other people to give you opportunities. And then when you are in the middle stage of your career, you now have developed some confidence, you can see opportunities and you can go and get opportunities for yourself. And then when you are at the top end of your career, you now see opportunities and your job is to give them back. You give them back to other people. You give opportunities to other people the same way you were given opportunities when you are starting your career. When you are at the top of the ladder, your job is to make a full circle and give back opportunities. So I think that was what that was all about, that campaign, to just celebrate women in leadership, but also to see what else they are doing to give back to their communities.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so why is it so important, particularly in construction, to highlight the contribution of women? Why is that so important?
It's important because construction is a male-dominated industry, and we need to encourage our young people. We need to encourage girls in particular, because if you look at most of the big construction companies, I should say, the people who sit in the boardrooms, you see that there's a very small percentage of women. The people who deliver big projects, sometimes now it's getting better. Women are there delivering projects, but it's not there yet. We need to shine the light on the construction industry to say it's not just a hard hat and muddy boots. There are lots of opportunities. Construction is a wide sector. There are lots of things that you can do. And I think many women, sometimes they shy away from construction because they think, oh, long hours, working on site, unsociable working hours. If you have a family, what are you going to do? But I think organizations are getting better as well. Companies are getting better at being inclusive and being flexible. I've had the opportunity of working for organizations that supported me when my children were younger. I could work from home. I could work flexi time. I could get to the office at a certain time and leave the office at a certain time. I worked with construction sites that understood that I was a mother. If we say we are meeting on site at a certain time, it has to be that certain time because I had to pick my children from school. So it's those highlights that we need to take to our young people to say the construction industry is evolving, it's improving. It's not what it was 33 years when I finished. It was harsh when I started 33 years ago. But now things are improving. There are rules and regulations. There are initiatives of inclusiveness and things like that. So going into schools, talking about these things is important. Going to career fairs, talking about these things is important. Engaging with gender ministries, for instance, so that they also tag into these things. All those things are important so that we attract more people, more women in the industry.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of what construction do is it's for society. We're building an infrastructure or building a road or whatever it is for society. And we need diverse leaders, we need diverse teams in these construction projects to represent all backgrounds so that what we're delivering for society meets the needs for that society. I think that's really important. And so it's the key to engage with children at a young age, is it? To encourage them into the sector and change that perception of the construction industry?
It is key, yes, because we need to catch them whilst they are young. We need to ignite their passions. We need to show them that there are many options. When we say construction, I started off in the drawing office myself, and then I worked on construction sites. And then I worked in materials laboratory, and I told you in the UK, I do lots more things. And now I'm dealing with infrastructure at regional level. I'm dealing with trade facilitation. So it's those stories that we need to tell our young people to say there's so much in construction that can be done. You don't have to be stuck on a muddy construction site in the rain. You can do that to get experience, but as you climb up the ladder, there are so many options. You can retrain yourself within the construction industry. You can get more qualifications. And you through experience and networks, you can do other things and your life can still go on. You can be a mother, you can be an engineer.
I think that's the thing, and I didn't know until I was in construction myself how many different types of roles there are in construction, how many different types of careers you could go down. And only now, having been in this industry for 13 years, do I see other jobs and think, or not jobs, but certain roles, like quantity surveying, and think, actually, I'm quite interested in that. But I love being a designer, I love being an engineer, but there are definitely other aspects, different sides to construction that you don't really get to see unless you're really sort of told about them. So, and I'm a father of 3 young children, 2 boys and a girl, and they just absolutely love, and I'm sure it's the case of every child, love just playing in the dirt, playing with little toy diggers and sand pits and putting things in buckets and trying to build sandcastles. So from a child's play perspective, they always love the construction side of things, not that they are sort of really aware of it, but somewhere down the line it sort of gets lost, and we sort of start to fall into these sort of mainstream, you'll either be a police officer, a doctor, or a fireman or firewoman or whatever. They always sort of trying to lose that almost play side. And then I don't know, why do you think that is? Why do you think we sort of lose that perception, lose that joy for actually just getting muddy and sandy and building and putting things together? My son loves to play with Lego, and because he loves it, so do my daughter and other younger son. It's why do we lose that?
That comes at different levels. From us being parents at home, we need to be, I can't tell the word, but you need to, I'm losing the English word for it. But when you see your children doing things, you need to see what they are doing, and you need to encourage what they are doing, and you need to channel what they are doing. And then you give them exposure to what you think they might be excited in doing, so that you keep that passion going. That is one level. And then when they go to school, teachers need to do the same. They need to carry on igniting that passion, because every child is different. And then at university, the same, we need to ignite that passion. But industry in general, industry needs to do a lot as well. We need to pick up where the parents left. We need to go into schools. We need to give the children exposure. We need to spend time working in schools. If they are working with mud, probably we do something with them that shows them that actually this can be a career in this. When you play in mud like this, maybe there's a career in doing this. So I think we need to encourage our industry. I keep going back to Highways England because I really had a good time when I was working with Highways England, and I became one of their career resource persons. So we used to have an career experience placement every year, and we brought in young people from schools, and they will be attached to a career mentor for 2 or 4 weeks. And you take them through all the departments of Highways England so that they see what is done there. I think that's what industry should be doing, creating those opportunities for children to come and sit in the office and see what is done. Highways England is quite massive. So we have the construction side, but we have procurement, we have finance, we have media, all sorts of things. And when you expose young people to all those things, although they hear Highways England, it's not just roads. We have so many divisions within Highways England. We have a big technology division. So when a young person comes and they spend 2 weeks with you, and every other day you are taking them through another division, by the time they finish, they know that there are other things. And even when they are interested, for instance, in playing with gadgets at home, they know that in Highways England, they play with bigger gadgets because we are doing active traffic management. We are doing regional control centers where we put cameras on the motorway, and we are managing the motorway remotely from a regional control center using more sophisticated gadgets. So it's things like that industry needs to work towards, so that we bring industry to the children.
I mean, it's those sort of things that working in the industry are quite obvious sort of to me. So I actively get my children to sort of see, let's try and build the foundations for this house by digging this trench, with your bucket, and or if we're playing with water, controlling the valve of the tank, makes the water go down slower, and water comes out like a trickle, but you open it, it comes out more, and that sort of stuff. Are there resources for sort of parents as such, or should there be resources where perhaps parents aren't quite aware of what we do in the construction industry, or the variety of roles there are in the construction industry?
Again, I didn't quite get that question.
Sorry, are there resources for parents that aren't fully aware of everything that you can do, the variety of roles within the construction industry that you're aware of? Or should there be?
I think they should be. Probably there are not as many, but I think they should be. There are places in some communities where we have young people who go there to spend their afternoons doing homework in play centers and things like that. It's places like that, I think, that we should resource, so that at young age, at that level of their ages, maybe industries could put small things, put Lego in those places. And then at bigger places, like at our libraries, for instance, at places where younger people go and spend their time, maybe if our industry, our companies can arrange something to go and spend a day at a library or at a community center and just showcase what they do, so that people who meet in those communities, they get more exposed, especially our young people. I know that we have career fairs, for instance, but I think we could tailor them a bit more too. They could be more targeted, so that when we do that with the aim of really exposing our young people to what we can do. I think companies are doing something, but I think there's still more that could be done.
And Moreblessing, I think you and I could probably spend hours talking about the varieties of what you're doing in Zambia at the moment and Highways England. But unfortunately, we will have to bring our podcast today to a close. But I want to sort of finish off by asking, what do you think is the most important aspect of leadership?
I think because we work with people that different personalities, like I say, we work with people with different passions, we work with people from different backgrounds. If we are to be effective leaders, I think listening is important. And then when you listen, respecting other people's perspective, respecting other people's views is important. And then when you have done that, maybe being humane, because we are human. We are working, although we are working, delivering all these things, we are still humane. We are working with people with families. We are working with people who have got real issues, people with health conditions, especially now in COVID, mental health, and all those other things. So when you are a leader, you should listen, you should be respectful of other people's perspective, and then be humane and just empathize with people.
I think that's incredibly important. I'd love to thank you for being our guest today. It's been an absolutely pleasure. I hope you've enjoyed it yourself, and I'm sure that absolutely everybody has learned a lot. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.